My mom called me a week before and said she wanted me to come home for a quick dinner with family. I didn't think much of it. I had been busy with work in another state, and visits back had become rare. She sounded calm but firm, like it was important I didn't say no. I trusted her and agreed, figuring it was just a casual evening. When I arrived, the house felt almost too quiet. My mom met me at the door with a serious look in her eye. She gave me a quick hug, then motioned for me to follow her. "You'll want to sit back here," she said softly, pointing toward a small table in the corner of the dining room. I walked in expecting laughter, food, maybe some catching up with cousins. Instead, the moment I saw who was waiting, my stomach tightened. At that table sat Maribel, my wife, and Tobias, my younger brother. Their faces froze when they saw me, and in that instant, I knew this dinner wasn't what I thought it would be. It was the beginning of something I couldn't have prepared myself. The room felt strange the moment I stepped in. Normally, family dinners carried chatter, someone always laughing too loud, the smell of food filling every corner. That night it was different. The air felt heavy, and people barely looked up when I walked past. A few nodded politely, others just kept their eyes on their plates, like I had interrupted something they weren't ready for me to see. My mother didn't stop moving. She walked straight through the room, not giving me time to pause or greet anyone. I followed behind her, trying to make sense of why no one said a word. My uncle cleared his throat, my aunt fidgeted with her fork, but no one actually spoke. It was as if they were waiting for something to happen. Gloria leaned close to me as we reached the far end of the dining room. Her voice dropped low, almost like she didn't want anyone else to hear. "You'll want to sit here," she whispered. She rested her hand lightly on my arm, her face unreadable. I turned toward the corner table. That's when I saw them. Maribel sat there stiff, her hands folded tightly on her lap, her eyes darting anywhere but mine. Next to her was Tobias, his body angled away, though I could see the tension in his shoulders. Two of our cousins sat across from them, their expressions uneasy, as if they had been dragged into something they didn't want to be part of. I stood for a moment, unsure why they were gathered separately from everyone else. The larger table in the center of the room was where we usually sat together, yet this one was tucked away, isolated. The rest of the family stayed quiet, pretending to focus on their food, but sneaking glances in our direction. I could feel the weight of those stares pressing against my back. As I pulled out the chair, the scrape of wood against the floor sounded louder than it should have. My mother gave a small nod, then walked away without explaining further. I sat down, my chest tight, my thoughts racing. Maribel finally looked at me, her eyes glossy but steady. She didn't smile, didn't speak. Tobias shifted, drumming his fingers on the table, avoiding my gaze completely. My cousins exchanged nervous looks between themselves, neither daring to say a word. No one touched the food in front of them. Plates sat full, untouched, as though eating was the last thing on anyone's mind. The silence at that table was different from the rest of the room. It wasn't casual, it wasn't comfortable. It felt staged, deliberate, like everyone already knew what was about to happen except for... I tried to hold myself steady, but every second stretched longer. My hands tightened in my lap, waiting for someone to explain why I was sitting there, why my wife and my brother were side by side in front of me while the rest of the family watched from a distance. The uneasiness grew thicker, almost choking. I didn't know it yet, but that quiet corner of the dining room was about to break my life open. I sat there waiting for someone to speak, my eyes moving from Maribel to Tobias and back again. The quiet stretched until my mother finally returned, standing just behind me. She didn't circle around the moment or try to soften it. Her voice was sharp, the kind she used when there was no room left for lies. "They've been together," she said, her words cutting through the stillness. "Almost a year now." At first, I thought I'd misheard her. My brain couldn't piece it together. But then Tobias shifted in his seat, and Maribel lowered her eyes to the table. My stomach dropped, a cold weight settling inside me. Before I could react, Tobias reached across and placed his hand over hers, not even flinching under the stares from the others. He didn't hide it, didn't act ashamed. He held her hand like it was his right, like I was the one out of place sitting there. My throat went dry. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. Every sound in the room dimmed until all I could hear was the slow pounding of my own heart. Finally, Maribel lifted her head. Her voice was steady but flat, like she had rehearsed it. "You've been too distant, Elias. Always working, always busy. Tobias, he understands me better." Her words burned as they left her mouth, each one twisting deeper. She didn't look guilty. She looked justified, as if betrayal was something I had earned. I turned to Tobias, searching his face for anything human, any flicker of regret. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, squeezing her hand, his jaw set in stubborn defiance. It was clear he didn't care how much it shattered me. I scanned the table, desperate for someone to step in, to say it wasn't true. But the cousins who sat there only lowered their eyes. Their silence told me what I didn't want to believe. They already knew. And then it hit me with full force. They all knew. The hushed looks, the tense air when I walked in. It wasn't confusion. It was guilt. Everyone at that table had been living with this truth, keeping it hidden from me while I went on blind. The betrayal spread wider than just Maribel and Tobias. It reached into the faces of people I had trusted my whole life, people who had shared meals and laughter with me, and all of them had decided I didn't deserve to know until tonight. I sat frozen, staring at their joined hands, at the way Tobias didn't even try to let go, at the way Maribel didn't pull away. My world shrank into that moment, and nothing else mattered. My mother stayed behind me, her hand resting on the back of my chair. She had forced the truth into the light, but the damage was already done. For the first time in my life, surrounded by people I thought were mine, I had never felt more alone. The weight of it hit me all at once, like my chest had been cracked open. It wasn't just Maribel's voice in my ears or Tobias's hand over hers. It was everything behind it. My wife choosing my brother choosing my wife, and the rest of my family choosing to keep it from me. I thought of birthdays I had missed because of work, the phone calls I promised I would make and forgot to. I thought of all the times I had pictured myself as a husband, as a brother, doing enough to be trusted and respected. But in that room, it was clear I hadn't been seen that way. They hadn't seen me as someone worth being honest with. My eyes went to my mother. She didn't look away, didn't hide. Her lips pressed thin, her hands still firm on my chair. She was the one who had dragged this into the open, the one who decided I deserved the truth, even if it ripped me apart. For that, I felt a strange mix of gratitude and grief. Gratitude because someone had spoken, grief because it took this long, and because she was the only one who thought I had the right to know. I pushed back from the table, the chair scraping against the floor. No one stopped me. Maribel's eyes flickered, but she didn't rise, didn't call out. Tobias leaned back with a smirk that told me he thought he had already won. The cousins still kept their eyes down, avoiding the sight of me walking away. Each step toward the door felt heavier than the last. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to ask how they could do this to me. But the words stayed locked in my throat. My silence was louder than anything I could have said. When I reached the hallway, I heard Tobias's voice behind me. "Guess he finally figured it out," he called, his tone dripping with mockery. A few nervous chuckles rose from the table, quickly smothered. I didn't look back. If I had, I might not have been able to leave at all. My hands shook as I opened the door and stepped outside. The cool air hit my face, sharp and almost painful. Standing on the porch, I realized humiliation wasn't just about being betrayed. It was about being the last one to know. Every single glance, every silence at that dinner table, reminded me I had been walking around blind while they all carried this secret together. I walked to my car with my heart pounding and my legs weak. I wanted to collapse right there in the driveway, but I forced myself to keep moving. I drove away without a word, the lights of the house fading in the mirror. My world had been torn open in front of the people I loved most, and all I could do was disappear into the night, carrying nothing but the sharp edge of betrayal with me. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the dark of my car for hours, parked outside the apartment I had shared with Maribel, staring at the building like it was something foreign. By the time the sun came up, the decision was already made. I wasn't going back inside to try and reason with her or demand explanations. There was nothing left worth saving. I packed my things quietly that morning, taking only what belonged to me. Clothes, tools, a few boxes of books, nothing more. Maribel wasn't there. She was probably still at my mother's house with Tobias. That made it easier. I left the keys on the counter and walked out without leaving a note. I found a small place to rent on the edge of town. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and it gave me space to breathe. The anger followed me, though. Every time I unpacked a box or tried to settle in, I saw flashes of them together. Tobias's smug face, Maribel's cold explanation, the silence of the family who let me sit in ignorance. The heartbreak sat heavier at night. I would lie awake wondering if there had been signs, moments I had brushed off as nothing. I replayed years in my head, questioning whether I had been blind all along. But even through the pain, one thought grew stronger. I wasn't going to let them walk away clean after what they had done. I thought of Tobias first. My brother who had always needed a hand. The one who called me when he couldn't keep up with rent. The one who convinced me to co-sign his car loan because his credit was too weak. I had stepped in over and over, believing I was helping him build a life. Now I realized he had been leaning on me while sneaking behind my back. Then Maribel. I remembered the years I worked extra shifts so she could finish school without debt hanging over her head. I thought about the bills I paid, the weekends I spent alone while she chased classes and internships. I had been proud of her, proud of us. And all along, she was quietly letting Tobias fill the space I thought was ours. It wasn't just betrayal, it was theft. They had taken my trust, my time, my sacrifices, and twisted them into fuel for their own comfort. They didn't deserve to walk into a new life together as if nothing had happened. as if I had simply been erased. The more I sat with that truth, the colder I felt. I couldn't undo what they had done to me, but I could make sure the pieces they had taken weren't theirs to keep. They wanted to build a future together? Let them try it without the foundation I had laid beneath them. I had been broken, yes. But under the weight of anger and grief, something sharper began to form, a plan. I didn't shout or make a scene. I moved slowly and with purpose. Anger sat under everything I did, but I kept my face calm and my voice low when I spoke to people. First, I gathered what I could find at home: old bills, bank statements, emails where I paid rent or tuition, copies of checks I had written, anything that showed money I had put into our life. I set them in order by date and made a list of each item and why it mattered. I went through our shared accounts with the same quiet care. Where Maribel and I had joint access, I closed cards and removed my name from subscriptions that linked our money together. I changed passwords on accounts where I still had control, and I made sure nothing automatic would keep paying for things that I no longer wanted to support. For the places I could not change myself, I called and asked what options I had. Sometimes the answers were slow or bureaucratic, but I wrote everything down: names of who I spoke to, dates, and what they said. The car loan was a bigger problem. I had co-signed for Tobias years earlier because he begged, and I trusted him. I contacted the lender to understand the process to remove a co-signer. They explained the rules and what might be required. I didn't expect an instant fix, but I also didn't accept being left on the hook while they built a life together. I asked the lender what evidence or steps would lead to a change and noted every requirement. I also began collecting receipts that proved I had paid household costs. Old tuition receipts, repair bills, and bank transfers that showed I had covered things for Tobias and Maribel were boxed up. I scanned documents and made digital backups, so nothing could be lost or altered. I labeled everything clearly and kept duplicates in a folder I carried with me. Because secrets had been kept by the family, I knew I needed an honest view of what was mine and what was shared. I sat with numbers for hours, mapping out who owed what and where money had flowed. The list grew long and ugly. I set aside pain and focused on facts. Facts felt fairer than shouting. I also saw the value of advice. I made an appointment with a lawyer to review the paperwork and to learn my rights. I paid for that first consultation without thinking twice. It was important to know what legal steps were possible and what would simply be a waste of time. The lawyer suggested sending formal letters to protect my interests and explained how separation of assets could be pursued. I followed every instruction carefully. All the while I kept my life small and quiet. I took days off work when I needed to sort things, but mostly I used late nights to compile everything. I refused to reach out to family members who had been part of the secret. Answers from them felt unnecessary. My planning didn't come from a place of cruelty. It came from a refusal to be erased and a need to make sure the support I had given would not be silently claimed as theirs. By the time I had a clear file of documents and a legal note ready, the shock had sharpened into cold resolve. I wasn't looking for drama. I wanted the truth to be recognized on paper, and I wanted the people who used me to face the consequences in the real world where money and responsibility matter. The first real step came with the house. Maribel and I had bought it together, but most of the money had been mine. She had put in very little, and I had handled nearly all the payments. My lawyer explained the process of selling my share and what it would mean for her. The papers were drawn, the filings made, and before she or Tobias could adjust, the house was placed on the market. She received notice that the property would not remain there. There was nothing she could do to stop it, because the ownership was legally tied to me. I didn't wait for arguments. I didn't give warnings. By the time Maribel realized what was happening, buyers were already lined up. The sale went through quickly, and she and Tobias were told they had a short time to vacate. The walls they thought would protect them were no longer theirs to live behind. While that was unfolding, I pushed on with the car. Tobias had begged me to co-sign that loan, swearing he would never miss a payment. But I had learned what his promises were worth. I spoke with the lender again, and when the account was reviewed under new terms, my name was taken off. That left Tobias exposed to payments he could not handle. Within weeks, the car was repossessed. I pictured him standing there watching it being towed, his pride stripped along with the vehicle. Piece by piece, I cut away the supports that had kept them comfortable. The accounts I closed forced them to pay their own way. The bills I had always covered landed squarely in their laps. The safety nets they had leaned on disappeared. For the first time, they were left to face the real cost of the lives they had chosen. I did all of it without a raised voice. I didn't knock on their door, didn't send letters filled with threats. Everything was quiet, official, and legal. Each move was a signature, a form, a transaction that left no space for arguments. The calmness of it became my strength. I didn't need to shout when the system itself carried out the weight of my decision. I heard through others that they were struggling. Tobias had no car to get to work. Maribel complained about how unfair it was that the house was sold. They bounced between couches, unable to keep up with expenses, slipping further into debt. None of it brought me joy in a loud or obvious way. It was more like a steady release of pressure from my chest, proof that I had not been powerless after all. I stayed silent, moving through my own days with focus. At night, I sometimes thought about what they had done to me, and the hurt still burned. But alongside it was a new kind of steadiness. I hadn't thrown fists, hadn't begged them to stop. I had taken back what was mine and left them with nothing but the mess they created. Their spiral wasn't sudden. It was slow, steady, and undeniable. Every step down was theirs to walk. I simply refused to hold them up anymore. It was months before I saw her again. I had settled into a routine, living quietly, keeping my head down at work, rebuilding piece by piece. The anger still lived in me, but it no longer burned every second of the day. I had control over it now. Then, one evening, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, Maribel stood there. Her hair was messy, her face streaked with tears, and she looked nothing like the woman who once sat across from me with her chin raised in defiance. She clutched her coat tight around her shoulders, as if she had run through the night just to get there. "Elias," she said, her voice breaking. "Please. I need your help." I didn't answer at first. I let her speak. She told me Tobias wasn't who she thought he was. He had no job now, no money coming in, no drive to change it. He drank too much, stayed out late, and left her to handle what little they had. The house was gone, the car was gone, and the bills piled high until collectors started calling. They had no place to land. She said she didn't know where else to go. As she spoke, I felt a strange calm wash over me. This was the same woman who had once looked me in the eye and told me my brother understood her better. The same woman who had sat silent while my world was ripped apart. Now she was standing in front of me, stripped of pride, begging me to fix the life she chose. She reached for my arm, her tears falling freely. "I made a mistake. I see that now. You were the only one who ever cared, Elias. Please, just help me get back on my feet. I can't do this alone." For a long moment, I just looked at her. The memory of Tobias's smirk, of her cold excuses, of the silence from the rest of the family, all of it flickered behind my eyes. She wanted me to forget all that and step back into the role of her safety net. Finally, I spoke, my voice steady, colder than I had ever heard myself sound. "You both chose each other. Live with it." The words hung heavy between us. For the first time since all of this began, her face changed, not to smugness, not to justification, but to fear. Her mouth opened, but no words came. She knew I meant it. There was no second chance waiting, no hidden softness for her to lean on. I closed the door slowly, leaving her on the other side. Her sobs followed me for a moment, but then faded into the night. I leaned against the wall, letting out a long breath. It wasn't joy I felt, it was finality. For the first time, I saw her for what she was, someone who made her bed and now had to lie in it. And for the first time, I didn't feel the urge to save her. Word of what happened spread quietly, as family news always does. At first, most of them had stayed out of it, pretending not to choose sides. But as time passed, the picture became clearer. Tobias and Maribel weren't building a new life together. They were dragging each other down. Relatives started to notice the calls for money, the sudden requests for favors, the excuses that never stopped. It began with my uncle, who had once given Tobias odd jobs. He told him not to come around anymore after Tobias failed to show up twice in a row. Then an aunt who had loaned Maribel a few $100s cut her off when she realized it was never going to be repaid. One by one, the doors closed. The same people who had kept quiet at that dinner table now saw the truth in plain view. Tobias and Maribel weren't victims. They were reckless and selfish. Meanwhile, I kept my distance. I didn't spread stories or defend myself. I didn't need to. Their behavior spoke louder than anything I could say. The calls they made, the favors they asked for, the bitterness in their voices, all of it painted the picture on its own. My mother stood firmly by me. Gloria visited often, bringing meals, checking in, making sure I knew I wasn't alone. She didn't gloat, didn't push me to talk about it. She just showed up, steady and proud, reminding me through her presence that not everyone had betrayed me. When relatives whispered about how calmly I had handled everything, she defended me, saying dignity had been my answer where anger could have destroyed me. Tobias and Maribel, on the other hand, drifted further into isolation. They moved from place to place, never able to settle. Without money, without the house, without the car, their days became smaller and smaller. They snapped at anyone who questioned them and blamed others for their problems. Soon, invitations stopped coming. Even the relatives who had once pitted them grew tired of the endless drama. I heard through cousins that Tobias had started showing up at family gatherings only to be avoided. Maribel tried reaching out to people she thought might still take her side, but most turned her away. It was clear the well of sympathy had run dry. The very people they had leaned on now wanted nothing to do with them. As for me, I felt a quiet shift. I had walked away humiliated that night, but months later, I stood taller knowing they had unraveled on their own. I hadn't needed to destroy them with noise or anger. They had managed that with their own choices. Gloria sometimes looked at me with a softness in her eyes, like she wished she could erase the pain I'd been through. But she also knew I had risen above it, and in her own way, she let me know she was proud. Tobias and Maribel were left with each other, broke, bitter, and unwanted. And in that emptiness, they finally faced the truth. They hadn't taken something better. They had only taken each other, and it was never enough. Time moved slower after everything fell apart, but it also moved cleaner. I filled my days with small things that belonged only to me. Work became steadier, evenings were quiet, and weekends were spent fixing up the little place I had rented. It wasn't much, but it felt honest. No lies in the walls, no secrets at the table. Just space that was mine. The anger that once sat heavy in my chest began to loosen. I still carried it, but it no longer burned every hour. Instead, I let routines shape me back into something steady. Cooking simple meals for myself, walking in the evenings, keeping track of my finances carefully. All of it gave me a sense of control I had lost before. Piece by piece, I was building something new. Eventually, I let people back into my life, but carefully. I learned how to listen to my instincts when trust was asked for. I stopped giving everything without thought. If someone wanted to stand in my life, they had to show they deserved that place. The old me would have given without question. The new me knew boundaries weren't cruelty, they were protection. I met new faces too. Friends came slowly, and with time, I even found myself opening my heart again. Not with the blind hope I once had, but with patience. I knew love could never be risk-free, but I also knew I had the strength to survive it if it broke. That knowledge gave me peace. What stayed with me most wasn't just Maribel's betrayal or Tobias's cruelty. It was the silence of others, the way family had chosen to let me be the last to know. That wound cut deep, but it also taught me something important. Not everyone who calls themselves family is willing to act like. Loyalty is proven in moments of truth, and when that moment came, most of them failed me. Yet, instead of letting bitterness shape me forever, I chose something else. I saw that revenge didn't have to be fire and shouting. It didn't have to be loud destruction. Sometimes, the sharpest revenge is silence. It is the refusal to carry the weight for people who broke you. It is letting them stumble under the mess they created, while you walk away lighter. I didn't ruin Tobias and Maribel. They ruined themselves when they chose betrayal over honesty. All I did was step back and take with me what was mine. I stopped saving them, stopped carrying them, and without me their comfort collapsed. That was enough. Looking back now, I see betrayal differently. It isn't just an ending, it can be a beginning. It tears you down, yes, but it also clears space. And in that space, you have the chance to build something stronger, something truer. I rebuilt, and I rebuilt carefully, with peace, with boundaries, with dignity. And the greatest revenge of all was simple, living a life untouched by the people who tried to destroy me.